Hey guys, it's Richard Seller here, talking to you a little bit about some of the things we've been seeing lately in our practice, which involves discrimination in the workplace, more geared toward a sexual harassment perspective, and also with just some terrible conduct toward women, toward gay employees in the workplace. And you know, I got to tell you, it shocks me. I'm a husband. I've got a beautiful wife, and I've also got two great kids. One of them's a daughter. And when I hear some of the language that goes on in the workplace toward women and some of the conduct, it makes me fear that one day my daughter could work for somebody like this, who just has a complete lack of respect for not only women in the workplace, but you also see it with regard to gay employees as well. You know, workplaces, we spend the majority of our time at work, right? Or at least most of us do. So the workplace has got to be a situation where you just feel truly comfortable. And it's a common sense test, folks. It's, you know, you're not going to walk into an office and act the same way you'd act around your buddies in a locker room. But there's a lot of employers that just either they're small-minded or they just don't understand that there's consequences to the types of actions that they do. And there's a famous case out of Miami that's been passed around for years. It's kind of a crazy story, but let me tell it to you. It's one of those, I don't know if it's an urban legend or urban myth, but it's been corroborated on different levels, meaning employers, other lawyers have said, yeah, it's a true story. But everybody keeps it hush-hush as to who the employer was who did it, because there's apparently a confidentiality settlement in place. And here's the story, and I cringe when I tell it, but it's the example I always give when I do training, okay? There was an administrative assistant who worked for it was a Cuban business owner down in Miami, and the guy was very crass, okay? And his commentary toward women was always of a sexual nature, sort of oogling the women or ogling them. I'm not trying to pronounce that word. Making comments about their boobs and their butt and their sex lives. But he was famous for one thing. In his office, he kept on a pedestal, in an enclosed glass case, a pair of knee pads and a bottle of Listerine. I'll explain if you're not shaking your head already what that means. But long story short, anytime a female employee would come into his office to ask for something, a day off or vacation or whatever it was, he would point to the pedestal with the Listerine and the knee pads, as if to suggest that if the woman employee wanted what she wanted, then she would have to get on her knees and do something for him. So, if you're not disgusted, in hearing that story, I'm shocked. But it was the type of situation which just sort of opens your eyes to the fact that the way men choose to conduct themselves in the workplace sometimes is just outrageous. And we handle a ton of sexual harassment type cases where it runs the gamut. We represented a lady who, through text messaging, her boss was saying to her, she was a waitress, she wasn't a high wage earner, but her boss was saying that he would give her more favorable shifts if she would do sexual favors for him. And she put it, she had it in text messages. And when she refused, he literally put in a text, if you're not willing to do what I'm willing to do, then you're fired. So, after we saw those text messages, and the client ultimately was fired, based on the text messages, we went aggressively after this employer. And we were able to get our client a recovery of $75,000 within 4 months. Now, remember, this was a minimum wage employee. At the end of the week, she's making a couple $100s. So this $75,000 was life-changing for her. We were able to get her enough money so she could go back to school. And she's now a nurse. She keeps in contact with us all the time and tells us about her accolades and what's going on. And that's the type of case where, it's so clear that men continue to treat women as their property in the workplace, and it's just not something we're going to tolerate. It's not something that the law tolerates, and we're going to go after it aggressively. We also see instances, not on a minimum wage scale, but of female executives who wind up on business trips with male counterparts who, after dinner, are invited back to a hotel room. They refuse, and then their employment takes a dip from there. And it happens. We recently represented a female employee who, after rejecting her supervisor, was subjected to a year of, essentially downgrading in performance and things of that nature. And we were able to recover. We settled her case about 2 weeks ago. She was a high-paid employee, but we were able to settle her case for about $270,000. And again, that's life-changing money, especially for an executive, in the sense of, she now has enough money to go find another high-paying job without the pressure of having to worry about where money's coming from, because we were able to secure a large amount of compensation for her based on the fact that she was fired, in essence, and downgraded in her employment for rejecting sexual advances. And that's just not something that can happen. So sexual harassment, believe it or not, still exists in the workplace. A new type of sexual harassment, not necessarily new, but prevalent, I'll use the word common, is discrimination and harassment based on gay employees in the workplace. And, we live in a time, it's great, where, the gay movement has reached so much steam that employees and people can feel like they can be themselves. When I was in college in the early 90s, most people, if they were gay, felt that they couldn't be who they were and kept it, if you will, closeted for so many years. And now it's just great to see that people can actually be who they want to be in the workplace. But it doesn't come, unfortunately, without ramifications. And we're seeing a huge uptick in the workplace where employees are being discriminated against or being treated differently based on being gay. And, give you a couple of examples that we've hit and that we've pursued aggressively is it starts with the subtle behavior, where we represented an executive who worked for a construction company who was being excluded from all of the things in the workplace because they assumed that because he was gay, he wasn't interested in football or going out for a drink after work or being included in management meetings. And the way he was treated was terrible. It was clear that there were assumptions made simply because of his sexuality that he wasn't capable of being, quote, just one of the guys. And, that's a case where there might not necessarily be overt comments about being gay, but it's clear that the treatment of the employee, the negative treatment, is based upon the fact that he's, quote, not one of the guys. So we pursued a case on his behalf after he was fired, after a poor performance report. We were able to find some interesting stuff on the Facebook page of the decision maker, where there were some actual negative comments about gays, not necessarily, curses are bad, but just, very much against, same-sex marriage and things of that nature, where after we were able to get that information out to the employer and their lawyer, they realized that this was not a road that they wanted to go down. And, we were able to get a nice settlement for this individual. I have never been, to my knowledge, the victim of discrimination or harassment in the workplace. I've worked for some terrible, terrible people. Let me be clear about that. But I don't think I've ever been the victim of discrimination or harassment in the workplace. But to see the effect that it has on my clients' well-being and their psyche makes us fight that much harder to make sure that we're able to get our clients a good recovery when we can, because it gives them the confidence back to be able to go back out in the workplace, to go back out and find themselves another job without the concern that they're going to be unable to pay their bills. And that's really what we fight for, is we go after these employers. The analogy has been used that discrimination against gay employees is very similar to race discrimination against blacks in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and even through today. But, I've heard the expression, gay is the new black when it comes to discrimination in the workplace. And I don't know that I necessarily disagree with you. You see it very commonly. I gave you one example or one story, but we represent recently another employee who worked in a traditionally male-dominated field, construction, and it was found out because of his Facebook and his Instagram that he was gay. He was hired, no problem, real big, muscular guy, and they found out that he was gay. And the comments about faggot and sweetie and you've got pretty lips and, suck this or, let me do this to you started in the workplace, especially the construction site. I think you got to imagine that things escalated where it got to the point where there were drawings of him doing sexual acts. They would take his picture that was up on social media and put his face on gay pornographic material and post it throughout the workplace. It was a pretty egregious situation, to the point where our client actually started suffering from pretty severe depression and anxiety, started treating with a doctor. He complained to Human Resources, who, quote-unquote, investigated it and told the employees to, quote-unquote, stop. But it continued, and it got to the point where on one occasion in the workplace, one of the guys came up to him and actually threatened him physically, and he defended himself. And he was the only one fired, not the guy who threatened him. I believe it was a wrench. I don't remember the specific example. In any event, we're in the process of negotiating a resolution of that case. It's going to be for a substantial amount because we're not going to allow this behavior to continue. But this is unfortunately the type of thing that we're seeing in the workplace. And it's just baffling. I mean, we're in the year 2016 here. And I hear stories on a daily basis about what goes on in the workplace. And it's either a complete lack of training by the employer or just a complete lack of caring by the employer. But you have to know this is going on in your workplace. And if you don't put a stop to it, you're encouraging it. So that's sort of our perspective on the types of harassment and discrimination we're seeing here in the workplace. You're on our website, I imagine, for a reason. You're looking for information. If you want us to take a look at your claim, if you just want some advice, it's always a free consultation. We're always happy to take a look. Email us or call us, whatever your preference is. Everything you tell us is confidential. It's attorney-client privilege protected. So feel free to let us know what's going on, and if we can help you, we're going to help you. And we're going to give you advice straight from the hip because that's how we operate our firm. So stay safe out there in the workplace. If you're not being treated the way you want to be treated, then reach out to us and let's see what we can do to try to help you. Hi, this is Richard Seller from www.floridaovertimelawyer.com. If you're a Florida employee and you feel your rights have been violated, reach out to our law firm either toll-free at 866-344-9243 or at www.floridaovertimelawyer.com. I personally evaluate every claim that comes in, and I will give you the advice whether we think we can help you or not on your claims. Also, if you're outside the state of Florida, we handle cases all over the country. So go ahead and give us a call or an email and let us know how we can help, and you'll get candid advice from a candid lawyer about what to do with your claims.